Welcome to another explosive episode of Stories That Will Blow Your Mind. Get ready to enter Reddit's darkest and most surprising stories, where nothing is as it seems. Today, we have a date that turns into something much more dangerous than a bad match. A text message that comes from where you least expect. Yes, even worse than those ghost messages from your ex. And a last-minute decision that, could fate have changed? Sit back and prepare for a roller coaster of revelations that will have you questioning every little twist in your own lives. This is going to get good, so let's get going.
I thought I was on a date. Turns out, it was an interview for a crime ring. A couple of years ago, when I had just gotten out of a rocky relationship, I decided I needed a distraction. And well, what better way than to return to the chaotic world of online dating? I made my profile, full of flirtatious photos and witty descriptions, and soon someone caught my eye. His name was Lucas. He had that mysterious and charming vibe that has always attracted me. Plus, in our first few conversations, he seemed fun, smart, and even a little exotic. After a couple of days of talking, he suggested we meet at a trendy bar. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting for me. Lucas was exactly like his photos. Tall, well-dressed, and with a smile that seemed to promise 1,000 secrets. We greeted each other, and soon we were at the bar, sharing cocktails and laughing as if we had known each other forever. But there was something odd about the way he looked at me, as if he were sizing me up. At the time, I thought it was just me, or maybe just a touch of nerves. After a while, the conversation started to get more intense, and not in a good way. Lucas started asking me personal questions that seemed oddly specific. At first, I thought he just wanted to know more about me, but then he started to get more and more direct. Do you have a good memory for remembering details? Have you ever done any work that involved acting secretly or undercover? He even asked me if I had ever had access to confidential documents. I started to feel uncomfortable. I tried to joke around to lighten the mood, saying something like, "Wow, are you interviewing me for a secret job or what?" But instead of laughing, he smiled at me in a weird way and just said, "You never know, maybe you're destined for bigger things." The conversation became more unsettling by the minute. I tried to change the subject, talk about more casual things, but he kept asking me about my skills, my work history, and weird stuff like if I had any training in self-defense or physical endurance, all while looking at me as if he was evaluating my answers, as if every detail mattered. At that point, I decided I'd had enough. I told him I needed to go to the bathroom and quickly stood up. As I walked toward the bathroom door, I felt someone else in the bar watching me. I turned around surreptitiously, and sure enough, there was a man in the corner watching us. A chill ran through me. After calming down a bit in the bathroom, I decided to head back to the bar, even though my instincts were screaming at me to get out of there. When I came back, Lucas had changed his attitude. He was much more relaxed now, as if he knew something I didn't. He looked at me with a satisfied smile and said, "I knew you were the one." At that point, I was completely confused and honestly terrified. I said goodbye quickly, saying I felt bad and needed to go home. He was understanding and walked me out the door. As we said goodbye, he took my hand and said, "We'll see each other again, trust me." I froze. When I got home, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something in me wanted to know if it was Lucas. When I picked up, a voice I didn't recognize spoke to me in a low, serious tone. "You're not ready, but we'll get back to you when you are." I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. From that night on, I never heard from Lucas again. I looked him up on the dating app, and his profile had disappeared. At first, I tried to convince myself that it had all been some kind of joke, or even just a weird date. But deep down, I knew there was something more.
So when your date starts asking you if you can keep secrets, if you remember faces well, or if you're good at adrenaline, you're not on a date. You're at a mob casting call. But hey, at least now you have some experience for your CV, potential candidate for double agent. But we're just getting started, so get ready because the next story will blow your mind. Let's hear it.
I got a text from my phone number. What I found out still haunts me. I was watching a movie in bed, trying to unwind after a long day at work, when I heard the buzz of my phone on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was some unimportant notification, so I paid it no attention. But when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. The message was from my own number. "Hi, Are you there? For a few seconds, I thought it was some kind of prank or network error, but I didn't quite know what to do. I responded as logically as I could. Who are you? Why are you texting me from my own number? The response was immediate. Do you remember me? I bet you do, because I see you every day. That message gave me the creeps. Was it some kind of hacker? Had someone cloned my number? I got out of bed and started pacing around the room, trying to figure out what was going on. And then another message came. I'm always around, more than you think. I started thinking of all the possible theories. A stalker, someone who had hacked into my phone bill, or even a practical joke by one of my friends. However, it didn't seem like any of their style. I tried calling my own number to see what was going on, but all I heard was static, until someone, in my voice, muttered, "You shouldn't have done that." I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. The next day, I decided to go to the phone company and explain the situation. The person at the counter checked my account and assured me that my number was not compromised and that they had not detected any strange activity. Great, I thought. Now even they think I'm crazy. That night, however, I received another message. You're the one who opened the door, and now you can't close it. I decided to investigate a little further. I remembered a cybercrime reporting number, so I called it and explained the situation. To my surprise, the officer on the phone mentioned that similar cases had been reported and described it as digital spoofing. His advice was to block the number, which obviously made no sense because it was my own number. Days went by with no news until, one night, while looking at my phone, I received another strange message. This time it said, "Why don't you come see me? I know where you are." My heart raced. This person knew my number and now seemed to know my location. I blocked the number, but the next morning I woke up to another message, now from an unknown number. That's not stopping me. See you soon. At this point, I decided to talk to the police. I filed a report about the messages and gave them all the information I had, but it wasn't much. They told me that without a direct threat, they couldn't do much, but to keep track of any new messages and stay alert. The situation began to affect me more than I wanted to admit. I began to wonder if I was actually being watched, if there were cameras or microphones in my house. In fact, I noticed that every time I was home and mentioned the messages to my friends or family, a new one would appear shortly after, as if someone was listening to every word. One day, I decided to investigate on my own. I searched my house from top to bottom for spy devices, but I found nothing out of place. However, in my search, I noticed something curious on one of my walls, a small mark on the paint, right next to one of the sockets. With the help of a screwdriver, I decided to take it apart to see if there was anything fishy behind it. That's when I realized that someone had installed a small recording device. I was overcome with real fear. Someone had been breaking into my house. I immediately called a locksmith to change the locks and told him everything that had happened. However, upon checking the door, he explained that there were no signs of it having been forced, and that it was possible that whoever had broken in had a key. I decided to talk to my landlord, who was also surprised and promised to change all the keys in the building. However, while we were talking, he seemed too uncomfortable and evasive when I mentioned the messages, as if he knew something he didn't want to tell me. At first, I thought it was just an impression, but then I started to remember certain details. I had once seen my landlord checking my mail by mistake, and on another occasion he had entered my apartment to make an urgent repair without telling me. The next day, I confronted him directly, and after a while of pressing him, he admitted that his nephew worked in a technology company and had taught him how to install some surveillance devices. He said it was just for security, but it didn't seem safe to me. I warned him that I would report him, and he, nervous, asked me not to do it and promised that he would remove all the devices. I decided to move out shortly after. Since then, I have not received any more strange messages, but the experience left its mark on me. Sometimes I still check my sockets and corners of the house, just in case.
Who needs a horror movie when you have your landlord as the main star, eh? First he asks for your keys, then he installs cameras, and at the end, he tells you that it was all for your safety. This sounds more like a spy thriller with hints of black comedy. How can you not notice that something smells fishy when he repairs your mail and enters your house without warning? So, security or professional stalker? Let's see if the protagonist of our third story is more skilled at reading the signs. Let's get started.
I switched flights last minute, and it might have saved my life. The story began at the airport. I'm not one of those superstitious people, nor am I one of those who follow impulses for no apparent reason, but that afternoon I felt an uneasiness that I couldn't shake. I was about to board a direct flight to the city where my sister lives, whom I hadn't seen in months, and although I wanted to see her, something inside me told me there was something strange about this flight. My seat was 17A, next to the window. I remember looking at my ticket several times while waiting at the gate, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that was growing. My coworkers had laughed when I told them that I preferred night flights because of the charm of traveling under the stars, but this time my charm was causing a knot in my stomach. And there I was, about to board, when I saw a notification on my phone. It was a message from my friend Julia, whom I met at university and who, by pure coincidence, had just landed in the same city I was flying from. She told me that she was in the boarding area, returning from a work trip, and that she would be at the airport for a couple of hours before catching her connecting flight. I stared at her for a moment, and suddenly, without thinking twice, I decided to change my flight. I knew it would be hard, but I figured that it's not every day that you get the chance to see such a dear friend. Besides, my sister would understand. I walked up to the counter and, after some back and forth with the airline, I managed to change my flight to the next one, which would leave about 3 hours later. Julia and I met up at an airport bar, ordered some beers, and caught up. We were laughing and enjoying reminiscing about old times when I suddenly noticed that the people around us seemed very tense. At first I thought it was my imagination, but Julia noticed it too. Something was happening on the news screens. The flight I was supposed to be on had crashed shortly after takeoff. My heart stopped. I was paralyzed, unable to process what I was seeing. Julia grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. The flight number, the time, the destination, everything matched the flight that had been changed at the last minute. I couldn't believe it. I stared at the screen, unable to move or fully comprehend what was happening. The images showed smoke, chaos, and ambulances at the airport, and the more details came to light, the harder it was to breathe. We spent the next few hours glued to the screen, in a mix of shock and relief as the news unfolded. The information was confusing, and there were reports of injuries, some seriously. Apparently, a mechanical failure had caused the plane to have problems during ascent, and the pilots attempted to return to the airport, but were unsuccessful and ended up off the runway, hitting a series of metal structures. In the midst of this whirlwind of emotions, my phone began to vibrate nonstop. Family, friends, even coworkers, everyone was trying to find out if I was okay. My sister sent me a desperate text. "Are you on a flight? Are you okay?" I felt a mix of relief and guilt as I replied that I was fine, that I had changed flights by chance. I had never felt anything like it, such profound relief mixed with such intense guilt for being safe and sound while others had not been so lucky. After a few hours, it was time to board my flight. It was already late at night, and the excitement of seeing my sister had been replaced by a strange feeling of vulnerability, as if the simple act of flying was testing me. Still, I boarded the plane and sat by the window in a seat that was curiously also 17A, the same one I had on my original flight. I tried to relax, but my mind kept reliving every second of that afternoon. I remembered the people at the gate, the faces of those who had to board that plane. I thought about how, somehow, I had dodged a terrible fate. I tried to breathe deeply and told myself that I was safe, that nothing was going to happen, but in my mind I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger had not completely passed. Just as the plane was taking off, I noticed a man in the seat across the aisle staring at me. He was an older man, with a serious, almost expressionless expression. At first I tried to ignore him, but his gaze made me increasingly uncomfortable. He seemed like he knew something I didn't. When I finally dared to look at him directly, he gave me a slight smile and murmured, "You've been very lucky today, haven't you?" My blood ran cold. I had no idea how he knew. I hadn't mentioned anything to anyone about the flight change. I tried to smile and told him that yes, I had changed flights at the last minute. He nodded, and then, in an enigmatic tone, he said, "Sometimes small decisions can change everything." The flight went smoothly, but that sentence kept coming back to me. When we landed, I saw the man get up and walk off the plane without looking back, as if that conversation had been a normal thing. My sister was waiting for me at the airport, and when she hugged me, I couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. I told her what had happened, from the flight change to the man's strange comment. He looked at me in silence and then simply said, "Maybe someone up there is looking out for you." The next few days were difficult. The story of the accident was all over the media, and I couldn't help but feel a deep, strange connection to each detail that came to light. Sometimes I felt relief, other times, a crushing sadness for those who were not as lucky. And above all, there was this nagging feeling that there was something more behind all of this. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe, as that man had said, our smallest decisions have an impact we could never foresee. To this day, every time I think back to that night at the airport, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't changed flights. And while I'll never have a definitive answer, what I do know is that that night, the impulse to see an old friend and the mysterious conversation with a stranger changed me forever. I don't know if it was luck, fate, or just the randomness of life. But every time I fly now, I carry with me the feeling that, in this life, sometimes chance can save us in the most unexpected moments.
Nothing like changing flights based on a gut feeling and ending up running into the prophet of aisle 17. I also listen to my sixth sense, except when it tells me to avoid eating tacos at midnight. But hey, at least in this story, intuition paid off big time. And that's it for this episode full of twists, heart-stopping moments, and suspicious business quotes. If you want more of these stories that leave us between what the heck and this can't be true, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Also, remember to leave us a good like and tell me in the comments what your favorite story was. See you in the next chapter of this Reddit saga where, believe me, things only get more intense. Until next time.